Everyone, welcome to the 2026 Data Standards Overview. My name is Alexander Fuller. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Everyone is on mute. I do encourage everyone to utilize the questions function on the GoToWebinar and ask questions as the presentation is going along, and I'll try to answer them in real time. If there's time at the end, we can answer more questions then as well. This recording is going to be available on our help desk, and then we'll also send out links for the slides as well. So what's on the agenda for today is that we're going to go through an overview of what the data standards are. We're going to talk through HMIS requirements, the rollout of the data standards. We're going to go through retired data elements, 8 data elements that were updated as part of the standards, new data elements, and then we're going to talk about reporting, federal reports, next steps, resources, and then if there's time, questions at the end. So what are the HUD data standards? The HUD data standards were established by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, in 2004 to create a consistent national framework for collecting data on homelessness. The standard ensures that all continuums of care, which are COCs, collect and report data in a consistent way, allowing for national analysis and comparison. The standards include both universal data elements required for all projects and then program-specific elements which are based on funding sources and project types. HUD typically updates the data standards approximately every 2 years at the start of the federal fiscal year, which is October 1st. So HMIS and the data standards. The Homeless Management Information System, which is HMIS, is a secure, locally managed database managed by HUD to track services, housing, and outcomes for people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The standards define what the HMIS is, how it operates, and what type of data must be collected. HMIS vendors and COCs may not alter HUD-defined questions or responses or response options in any way. So what that means is that anything that's in the data standards must stay that way, and we can't make any changes to the wording, the pick list options. They must stay exactly how HUD intended them to. Custom questions and responses may be added locally, but they may not interfere with federally required data elements. One thing to note is that HUD does not label questions as required or optional. If a question falls under those defined for your funding and project type, HUD expects that it will be completed. So in HMIS, you might see questions on an assessment that are bolded, indicating that they're required. You really have to know what's required for your program, because some assessments are more general, and if you have specific funding that requires specific things, you have to know what questions must be completed. So I really want to talk through like what a typical timeline for data standards usually looks like. So in September, well, the end of September, September 30th of the prior year, the final updates are submitted to the data standards mini team. Mid-October of the prior year, the final change recommendations to HUD from the data mini team are sent. The end of October, so October 31st of the previous year, the final approval by HUD federal partners of all the updates. And then on December 31st, the beginning of the year, those things are provided to vendors of a draft version of the data dictionary, reporting glossary, and reporting specifications. So at the beginning of the year, vendors for our community to be would be informed of what's coming down the pipeline in terms of updates or what's going to be changing in the standards. February 1st, vendors are provided with the final version of the data dictionary, reporting glossary, and reporting specifications. So at that time, vendors are able to begin working on implementing those changes into the system so it could be ready to go live for October 1st. Typically on April 1st, HUD releases the data standards manual, the data dictionary, reporting glossary, and reporting specifications on the HUD exchange. So usually everyone is aware of what's to come, and we can kind of plan for it and understand or kind of read through the documentation and understand what is to come. September 1st, vendors provide a test sandbox site to COC. So we did receive a test sandbox site that usually goes out September 1st, and that's just so we can prepare documentation internally and begin the rollout process. And then October 1st, updated data standards go live into HMIS. So this is the typical timeline for how data standards usually roll out. So the last instance in 2024, it followed the same timeline. So this year's timeline was a little bit different. It started off again September 30th of 2024. Updates were submitted to the data standards mini team. Mid-October of 2024, those change recommendations went to HUD from the data standards mini team. October 31st, approval by federal partners of all the updates. December 31st of 2024, again, vendors were provided a draft version of the data dictionary, reporting glossary, and reporting specifications. And between January and June of 2025, HUD had a draft version of all documents supporting the fiscal year 2026 data standards for review. So from January to June, HUD had these documents in review. So typically, again, in April, those standards would be available on the HUD exchange, and vendors would have already had those final versions to begin preparation. In June of 2025, so HUD did release an update, but it was to the fiscal year 2024 data standards manual. And in that, it did retire gender and sexual orientation. It didn't add any new data elements, but it was just an update to the 2024 fiscal year data standards. August 14th of 2025, HUD shared with vendors that they would not be collecting the sex data element for their funding sources. So August 14th, any projects funded by HUD, it was under the impression that none of their funded projects would need to collect this data element. On August 20th, HUD shared with vendors that they will be requiring the sex data element to be collected for their funding sources. And in addition, are going to be retiring the translation assistance needed data element. August 22nd of 2025, HUD documents were shared with HUD to go through so HUD can go through the review. So now it's August 22nd and HUD has not finalized the standards yet. September 1st, vendors did provide a test sandbox site. So the test sandbox site was what vendors knew what the data standards entailed. So what was released on September 1st was not the final version, or there could have been a potential update to what was released. September 19th of 2025, HUD provided messaging to vendors about the fiscal year 2026 data standards and confirming that a go live date of October 1st was good. And then October 1st, the data standards are planned at this time to be updated. So this is a very different timeline than what typically happens during a data standard update year. So this is the reason for a lot of the delay and information on what's changing this year. So next we're gonna go into the updates in the 2026 standard. Are there any questions before we move forward? Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk through are retired data elements. So the first two data elements we're going to talk through is gender and sexual orientation. Again, these were retired in the update to the fiscal year 2024 data standards, but we are including them now in the 2026. Um, so going forward, these data elements will no longer be available in HMIS to view or report on starting October 1st of 2025. In addition, these data elements will no longer be included in help desk documentation or COC system reports and dashboards. The reason for this is to ensure that the COC and HMIS are in full compliance with the 2026 standards, as well as the federal executive orders. The next thing that's going to be retired is the translation assistance needed. And then also is going to be funding sources. So HUD ESG CV funding and then HUD HAPA CV funding are going to be retired. So if you have projects with those funding sources, we're going to need to replace them with more up-to-date funding. So we'll reach out if we identify your project as having one of those or having one of those with nothing else. We'll be able to sort those things out. Okay. So are there any questions about any of the retired data elements before we move on to data elements that have been updated? Okay, so for the first update is going to be with race and ethnicity. So the question itself is not going to make any changes, or any the wording of the question isn't going to change, or how the question operates. So you'll still be able to select multi-value, but what's going to change is actually the Hispanic pick list value. So currently it's Hispanic Latina EO/E/O, and it's going to transition into Hispanic/Latina/O. So it's just going to be a wording change for the Hispanic pick list option. So when this goes into effect October 1st, you're not going to need to go in and make any adjustments to clients that have already selected this option. The pick list value is going to update automatically. The wording change is going to happen automatically. So there's no need to make any adjustments. So the next thing that's going to be updated is going to be requirements for the housing move-in date. So what's going to be required now is that projects that are receiving VA grant per diem case management and housing retention funding are going to be required to complete the housing move-in date going forward. So starting October 1st, it's going to be required for you to put the housing move-in date in for your clients. The next one is going to be for date of engagement. Again, these questions aren't changing. The wording or how they function are not going to change. What's changing is the requirement or the addition of new funding to the requirement. So for date of engagement, projects that are funded for Youth Homeless Demonstration Program, which is YHDP, they're going to be required to add a date of engagement via project entry for all clients going forward. So October 1st is going to be the date in which that's going to take effect. Okay, so the next thing that's going to be updated are going to be a couple of RIDE common questions, which is going to be last grade completed, employment status, and general health. So again, these questions aren't going to change. The wording, the pick list values are all going to remain the same. What's changing about these is going to be clarification on the requirements. So right now, the requirements specify HUD VASH, but it's going to be updated to clarify that it's only going to be required for HUD VASH collaborative case management. So not all of HUD VASH, just specifically HUD VASH collaborative case management. And although these are right questions, these questions are still going to apply to all funders that had this requirement previously. So nothing is going to change with the RIE requirements around these questions. This is strictly around clarification around HUD VASH. Any questions about any of the updated questions or retired questions? Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk through is family crisis issues. So this is going to be updated, or these set of questions are all going to be updated to now include in the pick list, client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. So now you have a little more flexibility in terms of being able to accurately reflect the client's choices. Okay, so the next set of updates are going to be geared towards SSVF funded projects. So the first one is services provided. So services provided is going to have a pick list value added, which is going to be healthcare navigation. So all of the other values are going to stay the same. It's just going to add healthcare navigation. The next update for SSVF is going to be the homeless prevention targeting criteria question. So inside the conditional logic of targeting criteria, two questions have wording changes. So the way that targeting criteria works is that it's a single question. If you select no to it, nothing populates. If you select yes, I believe like 11 additional questions will populate. Of those, two are going to have wording changes. The pick list values aren't going to change, just the questions themselves. So the first one is going to be household size of 5 or more, requiring at least 3 bedrooms due to age and gender mix. That will be updated to household size of 5 or more, requiring at least 3 bedrooms due to household composition. The next question that's going to be updated is households includes one or more members of an overrepresented population in the homelessness system when compared to the general population. That question is going to be updated to households which may include one or more members meeting with other criteria for targeting prevention determined by the COC. So these two questions are specifically for SSVF. And one is just adding a new pick list value, and then the targeting criteria is just wording changes. Okay, so now we're going to talk through the new data elements. So the first data element we're going to talk through is the new sex data element. So data for this element will be collected at client or record creation. This question will not be available on any assessments and only will be accessible via the client profile. So this is a little bit different than the retired gendered field where it was available on assessments. This is going to be only located in the client profile. So it's important that when you're creating new clients that this is added at that time, or you're going back and filling it out in the client profile. This data element is going to be required for all project types. Data collection for the sex field begins on October 1st and should be completed for all clients new and ongoing who are receiving services on or after that date. So starting October 1st, any new clients that enroll in your project, again, you're going to want to make sure that at the time of record creation, you're selecting the appropriate answer for the sex field, or if there's an existing client and their record is already created, that you're navigating to the client profile to complete that question. So when it comes to the new sex field, it is required for various federal funders. So for HUD is going to be HUD COC, HUD COC YHDP, COC Builds, ESG. When it comes to ESG Rush, except emergency shelters, so it's going to be required for everyone except for emergency shelters. HOPWA, unsheltered and rural special NOFO. VASH is only going to be required for collaborative case management, pay for success, PATH, RI, SSVF, rapid housing and homeless prevention, GPD, community contract safe haven, and CRS contract residential services. So these are the funders in which it's going to be required for. We do encourage that although you might not be funded by these projects or by these funders, to still complete the field. Okay, so just a little info about the new sex field is that it's only one option can be selected from the following pick list values, which are going to be female, male, client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. So this question isn't going to operate as the gender field did, so it's not going to have multi-select, so only one value can be selected. One thing to note is that gender and sex are, or the way to view it is that gender and sex are distinct concepts and cannot be mapped from one to the other. So in the fiscal year 2024 data manual, gender is defined as a client's self-identification with one or more gender categories. In contrast, in January of 2025, sex is defined by federal executive order as an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. So on October 1st, there's not going to be any mapping of the previous gender question over to the new sex question. You will have to go in and manually update that. But we do encourage that you review this with the client when completing this and not do a internal map of previous values over into this new field. Are there any questions about the new sex data element? Okay, so we do have a question. Is there guidance on how to collect the sex field in a client-centered way if their gender identity does not match their sex assigned at birth? Okay, so that's a very, very good question. So at this time, we haven't really got into it in the slides just yet, but at this time, HUD has not released the final version of the data standards. In that, I will hope that there is some guidance around that. So then we'll be able to follow up once that becomes available. Okay, so another question is that on 10.1, we will have to go into all our clients and complete the new sex field. Yeah, so starting at 10.1, you can go in and start completing the new sex field for all of your clients. There's not a, although we will hope that you kind of be proactive in putting these things in. They don't have to all be in on October 1st. So it's not a rush to go back and fulfill all of these things. What's most important is that any clients going forward would need to have that starting day one. So if you're enrolling any clients on 10.1, they should have that completed on 10.1. Okay. Did you say we need to manually update sex field for each active client? So we do strongly encourage that you go in and complete them for all active clients. So new existing or new clients, and then as well as clients that are already existing in your project. So the next question, so we have to go back and redo people's answers who previously were non-binary. So based on HUD's guidance, they instructed vendors not to map the previous question over into this new question. So uh, that's the reason. Well, that's the bigger reason is that from HUD to vendors is that they're not supposed to be mapping these two values. We won't need to fill out the sex field for participants who have exited. Is that correct? So clients that have exited your project already, you will not have to go back and alter their enrollment. So those clients are fine. This is for active clients that are still receiving services within your project. Okay, so what is our deadline for collecting and putting in sex for our active clients? So there's no deadline on that. There's not it needs to be done by this date thing. When it comes to the active clients that are going to be in your project that were enrolled prior to October 1st. Any clients that are enrolled in your project starting October 1st, they're going to need to have that completed. So what about next data quality? So for the data quality period that's going to look at data starting October 1st, which will be uh, the first data quality, I believe in 2026, we will account for that within reporting. Okay, we have another question. Will I have to change my client's name on HMIS back to their government name when I change their sex? Um, that's a good question. As of right now, I don't believe that's going to be the case. Again, we haven't seen the final documentation of HUD guidance. So at this time, I would say no, but we will follow up if there's more to the data standards than we're outlining today. Updating the sex field manually places an undue burden on programs, especially organizations that have a large number of clients. Is there a way we can push back on this as a COC? So again, the new sex field is a required HUD field for clients starting October 1st. So any clients that enroll in your project October 1st is a HUD requirement that this question is completed. In terms of clients that are active in your project, we're strongly encouraging that you go in and complete this question. There's no due date or expectation on completion, but we're strongly encouraging you to go back and complete this field. Okay, any more questions before we move on to the next slide? Okay, so the next new data element is going to be financial assistance, which is going to be for SSVF funded projects. So a new date field is going to be added, which is start date of financial assistance. This new required date will be conditional logic, so it only displays when SSVF financial assistance types is populated in the pick list. So in the screenshot below, you can see the initial SSVF financial assistance type. If you put anything into that field, the following date questions are going to populate. So the start date of financial assistance or financial services is the date that financial assistance is supposed to begin. And the date provided is the date that the financial assistance was identified as a need. So these dates can be the same date. So what this means is that if a client is coming to your facility for services or for financial assistance and you identify the need, that would be technically the date provided. So the date that's going to be required for this field here is the date that the services or the financial assistance actually started. So again, they can be the same date, but if they're not, it's going to be the date where the financial assistance started. Okay, so the next question is going to be mental health consultation. Again, this is going to be for SSVF and also GPD. So the new data element will be mental health consultation status with the pick list values of mental health consultation complete, mental health consultation being coordinated, arranged by VA provider, mental health consultation being coordinated, arranged by other provider, and then offer declined. So this question is going to be available on the SSVF assessment as well as the GPD assessments. And starting October 1st, again, you'll have to begin completing this. And this is going to be required for SSVF rapid housing, SSVF homeless prevention, and then VA grant per diem, case management, and housing retention. Okay, so next we're going to talk through the reporting for fiscal year 2026. Are there any questions on any of the data elements that we just talked through, either being retired, updated, any of the new ones? Okay, so the first report we're going to talk about is the APR and the ESG CAPER. So these two reports are very similar. They share a lot of the same questions. So the first question that's going to be updated is question 6A, personally identifiable information. So this table actually is going to remain the same. The only thing that's going to change is that they're going to remove the gender row from the table. The next question is going to be 6F, which is inactive records contact. So again, this is going to be one of the roles. And what's going to happen is that they're going to remove emergency shelter night by night from the count of contacts. So emergency shelter is not going to count as a contact going forward. And when they're going to add PATH funded services only, supportive services only projects to count or to the count of contacts. So based on the funding source of the project. Also, the wording for the contact row is going to change, and it's going to be contact adult and head of households and street outreach or PATH funded SSO. Next question that's going to be new to the APR and the CAPER is going to be question 24E, which is going to be the new sex table. So this is going to pull in values based on a new question. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. Would entry assessments for minors, income sub-assessments will still be mandatory on emergency shelter entry and exit records? Yeah, so nothing's changed to my knowledge about that. So the requirements previously are going to remain the same for emergency shelter data collection. Okay, so we do have another question. Bridget, I'm gonna actually follow up with you on your question right after this webinar, if that's fine. And then there's another question. How long do you estimate taking to update the APR reports in HMIS so that they can be uploaded to Sage? So that's a couple of slides ahead, but they are going to be updated as of October 1st. So we'll get to that in just a second, but October 1st, they'll be available. So the things in the APR and the CAPER that's going to actually be removed are, again, all in relation to the data elements changing. So question 10A, which is gender, currently that's available in the APR and the CAPER. Question 10D, which is gender by age range, which is only available in the CAPER. 24C, which is sexual orientation of adults and permanent supportive housing, which is only available in the APR. Question 25C, which is gender, veterans APR, or is available in the APR. And then 26C, gender of chronically homeless persons, which is available in the APR, gender, youth, it's also an APR question. And then 24D, translation assistance needed, which is the APR and the CAPER report. So these questions are going to be removed as of October 1st from the APR and the CAPER. So other federal reports. So for the PATH project, again, it's going to follow the same changes to the data standards. So 26A, gender is going to be removed. 26L is going to be a new sex table. And then updates for race and ethnicity. So again, the Hispanic, Latina, O is going to be the new pick list value. So that's going to be included in that report as well. When it comes to the HUD CSV, so these are including the VA repository reports. So the VA reports for SSVF and also GPD, as well as the hashed CSV, which is for RI reporting. Those are going to be updated a part of the HUD CSV updates. So a couple of things that are going to be updated with it. A lot of this you're not gonna be able to see, but they're expanding the allowable character set for these reports. So UTF-8, and then the source type and then the source ID clarifications, and then updates to the client enrollment service for pick list changes, retired data elements, and new data elements. So again, that just means that the data elements that we just talked through, any ones that are being retired or added are going to also be retired and added into the HUD CSV file. Okay, so we have another question. Within our system, what was that question about translation being used for previously? Um, to my knowledge, I believe it was mainly being used in the scope of coordinated entry, but I'm not sure to my knowledge. But I can follow back up with you after this call. Are there any other questions regarding reporting? Okay, so for the reporting timelines going forward, so Sage will be updated will update it on October 1st to only accept fiscal year 2026 COC APR, ESG capers, and COC or coordinated entry APRs. So these three reports that get uploaded into Sage starting October 1st, the file must be in fiscal year 2026 format. So what that means is that if you wait until next week, the 29th, to run a report and you're planning on uploading that file into Sage on the 2nd, Sage is going to reject that file and you're going to have to run a brand new report in HMIS that's going to be under the fiscal year 2026 format. So the PAF annual reports are expected to be due mid-December of 2025. When it comes to the RAI reports, they will be using the fiscal year 2026 hash CSV starting October of 2025. That should be available day 1, October 1st. And then the VA will use fiscal year 2024 CSV for the annual reporting that's due in October, and then transition to use the fiscal year 2026 for the November upload. So this is pretty important just because if you are a VA provider, you're going to want to make sure that you are submitting your October reports as soon as possible and making sure that they get submitted, because once the transition over to the fiscal year 2026 reports for November happen, it might cause some complications if you're going back running the October report in November. So just to avoid any of those complications, we just strongly encourage that you get those submitted as soon as possible. Okay, so next steps. The HUD 2026 data standards will go into effect at the start of the federal fiscal year, which is October 1st of 2025. On that date, the HMIS system will be updated to reflect the new standards, including changes to data elements, response options, and system logic. The HMIS team will send out an email the morning of October 1st confirming that the updates have been successfully applied. And then at this time, again, HUD has not finalized the public documentation. It is expected to be posted on the HUD Exchange 2 to 3 weeks after the standards go live. So once that time happens, we'll have a chance to take a look, and then we'll be able to make any adjustments to our documentation or our wording around anything at that time. We will host a follow-up webinar on October 6th to provide detailed guidance on how to complete the new sex field in HMIS and then any best practices. So we do have a webinar link here. We are going to send this out following this webinar, so you can sign up for the next one. So the next webinar can be for anyone that this information would be useful for. So if it's ATAs and then ATAs want to take that information back to their team, that's fine. If ATAs want to include their entire team on the webinar, then that's great also. So this slide here just goes over various HUD resources. So these links are the HUD Exchange, a link directly to the data standards, CLC program manual, PAF, HOPWA, VA, YHDP, RI, and BASH. So one thing to note is that these are the current links that we have for these particular manuals. Earlier in the year, a lot of the documentation got removed from these links, or these links went down. So some of these links might not be back up just yet, but the expectation is that once the 2026 standards gets finalized, all of these links should be updated with the appropriate new standard information. So just because it doesn't work today, I would check back to confirm. If any of these links do change, we will send out a more up-to-date list of links. So one thing we are going to do is we're offering office hours between October 1st and October 10th to address any questions agencies might have regarding the 2026 data standards or implications for their project, or just questions in general. So we'll be available for 30-minute sessions. These sessions are going to be done via Microsoft Teams. We do encourage agencies to include all staff that would benefit from the meeting. So again, if you have a question about a specific thing on the data standards and you think it'd be beneficial for your entire staff to hear it, it'd be great to have them all on the call as well. So similar to our more recent processes, we do have a booking link where you'll be able to select times to meet. So please utilize this. Times sometimes do fill up pretty quick, so just be mindful of that. Okay, so we do have about 10 minutes left. So if there's any questions, hopefully I can answer them. But if not, enjoy the rest of your day. Again, thank you everybody for joining the webinar today. We will send out a follow-up email with the link to the next webinar, as well as documentation as it comes out. And we will compile all the questions that were asked today and then create a question and answers article on our help desk where these questions with the answers can live. But again, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll remain here for about another 10 minutes just to answer any additional questions.